What's up, guys? Today's episode is really exciting. It's with Julian Sage, who is the short term rental sage or Airbnb guy. And he's a friend of mine. We met a few months back and we've gone to FinCon together. We've gone to Bigger Pockets together. We've been talking a lot. He is a active duty Coast Guard and only an E4 who is doing very, very well for himself. He's got a very bright future, and if you like Airbnb, VRBO, vacation rental, or are even interested in what all that means, stay tuned. And don't forget, show notes are found at FromMilitaryToMillionaire.com/podcast. Now relax and enjoy the show.
You're listening to the Military Millionaire Podcast, a show about real estate investing for the working class. Stay tuned as we explore ways to help you improve your finances, build wealth through real estate, and become a person that is worth knowing.
Today's episode is brought to you by Proper Insurance, which is insurance for short-term rentals. Now, you may be saying, but Dave, I have homeowners insurance. And yes, that's what I thought. But all homeowners insurance policies carry a business activity exclusion. In other words, any claim involving business activity could rightfully be denied. And since Airbnb can generally be considered to be a business activity, your policy may just not cover you. So it's definitely worth taking the time to just jump on a call with these guys and hear what they have to offer. It's affordable insurance, and it is much better to cover your rear if you're interested in short-term rentals than it is to not and be screwed. So definitely take a look. Proper Insurance. There will be a link down below, and I recommend you at least, just like I said, give them a call, hear what they have to offer. Quote's free. Check it out. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm here with Julian Sage, the short-term rental guy, who is a friend of mine. We met, I guess, like 6 months ago, really through YouTube. He reached out to me. I would like to go on record because I don't know that no one ever does that, so that's cool. And then we went to FinCon together, and then we went to Bigger Pockets conference together, and then we've been talking ever since. So it's been good. But so Julian is a petty officer third class, or E4 in the Coast Guard, who is like absolutely crushing it, probably more so than a lot of my guests have been crushing it in the Airbnb game. And he's got a ton of awesome stuff going for him, including coaching and podcasting, and we'll get into all that, but just absolutely crushing it. So Julian, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much, David. It is really an honor. I wanted to reach out to you because I love what you're doing within the military community. I started my own military podcast, or my own military YouTube channel, all about like Coast Guard and finance. So when I saw that you were doing, military finance and real estate, I was like, man, this guy is just so cool. And I think at the time you only had like maybe 300 or 400 subscribers. And when I was reaching out to you, I think I was at like around 2,000, but this isn't to like boast or anything, but I was just like, man, this guy is going to crush it. And then lo and behold, you're just like quickly outpacing. And I think what you're doing is so cool. You have such an awesome community. I'm in your mastermind group. So for those of you that are in the military and want to join, definitely it is so cool to be with a bunch of like-minded individuals that are crushing it in the military real estate space. So thank you so much, David, for everything that you're doing with this community.
I didn't tell him to prep to promote that, but I'm glad you think so. I'm having a lot of fun running that mastermind group, and we've got some pretty solid guest speakers lined up, some absolute specialists. So it's going to be cool. Julia, give us a little bit about your story before we dig into some short-term rental stuff that everyone wants to hear about.
Yeah, that's a long story. I've been in the Coast Guard for about 6 years now, coming up on 6 years. And when I first started, I tried a bunch of different things. I was trying the cryptocurrencies. I made like 120,000 while I was in A school as an E3, and then quickly lost it because the market went up and then it went back down. I've tried mobile home investing and tried that out as well. I started in the LLC, was going to a bunch of different parks and trying to figure out like, what it is that I wanted to do. I've looked into like wholesaling. I did like stocks and options and tried all these different things, and nothing really clicked. I even tried making an app. So while I was in E3 and at my last unit, I was developing a cooking app. where people could find recipes based off ingredients in their kitchen. And I was paying investors like I think I spent like almost $10,000 to develop this app in over 7 months. And then I quickly realized that I was way outside. I was trying to build way too much. Wasn't able to build this minimum viable product, which is what you try to build, like just something to get out the gate, and became quickly overwhelmed. I was planning on getting out at that point, but I wanted to learn how to be how to code and how to do this stuff. So I started taking college classes, was going to be getting out of the Coast Guard, but I kind of got that fear like, hey, I'm going to be getting out, going to be doing something that I'm not super familiar with. And so I decided to stay in and become an IT in the Coast Guard. And I mean, it was such a blessing that I did stay in at that point, because I really was still figuring out what I wanted to do in my life. Like I tried all these different things and was investing my time and energy and just figuring out what it is that I wanted to do, thinking that I wanted to do all these different things. But I'm so glad that I stayed in and wanted to continue on with the Coast Guard, because it allowed me even more time to really discover what it is that I wanted to do. So from there, I got to my next unit, became a petty officer. I purchased my first house, and I quickly realized that, being in the DC area, it was very expensive to live here. The BAH is around 2,400, or it's like 2,495 for an E4 that's married. And I was like, man, that's a good chunk of change. And being an E4, you're not making a whole lot of money for your base pay. So I said, I need to be able to save this money. And in the Coast Guard, it's not like a lot of the other military branches where you have to live on the base. So as an E3, at the previous units that I was at, I was always living in the economy and getting BAH. So I was actually able to, I had to learn how to house hack right off the bat, because I didn't know, I needed to be able to save money, because, so I had a roommate at my first unit. At my second unit, I lived in a small studio, but then when I got married, we got a bigger place, and then we got another roommate. So I've always been able to house hack my properties. So when we came to this place in DC and I wanted to purchase a property, my wife was actually like, hey, why don't we do this Airbnb stuff and get into this space? We can basically house hack our basement. And when my wife was on board, I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's jump on this. So we found a property that we could renovate the basement. We went through this whole long renovation process. I started this podcast because short-term rental success stories, because I wanted to know what other people are doing in the space. So I started reaching out to other hosts, other people that are Airbnb hosts, and I was talking to them, finding out like, hey, what can I do to make my unit good? Really kind of doing this for myself, honestly. And through there, I started reaching out to a bunch of people. I found this one guy who was making he had over 22 properties through this thing called rental arbitrage, and we'll talk more about that. But he was killing it, and he saw that what I was doing with the podcast, and he was like, hey, you're crushing it. I was like, well, you're crushing it. You're making a lot of money. Yeah. And I don't even have a property at this point. And he was like, well, let's start a podcast together. And I said, okay, let's do that. Free mentorship. And I got my property up and running. It was able to cover my mortgage payments, and that's really kind of where we are today.
Dude, that's crazy. So I love a lot of what you say in there. I love that you were going to do a cooking app. I'm actually kind of curious to pick your brain on that, because I've debated the idea of playing around with a small app before, but I kind of fear what you were talking about, like throwing a lot of money at it and then it just be like crap. But I love, obviously the whole journey, but the fact that you said you started a podcast because you wanted to learn something and didn't know, like that's the perfect way to go about that. So I started the podcast kind of unintentionally because I was just interviewing people to talk to them. And what I realized very quickly is some of the biggest benefits of podcasting, aside from the whole credibility thing, is the fact that I get access to people I would not normally get access to, because someone who's way out of your league as an investor when you're newer is not going to be like, yeah, sure, I'll give you an hour to talk to you about anything you want to talk about without something in it for them. And the podcast is something in it for them because people can hear it, whatever. So the fact that you did that, you literally found a way to not only find a mentor, but to find a whole lot of mentors from people who've done it very successfully and been there already where you want to go. and you did it in a way that helps them out, because everybody listening is going to get something out of it. Your hosts are going to get some publicity, you know, a backlink, whatever. Like, that's just a really cool way to do that. I always tell people to start a meetup if there's not a meetup in your area, and you basically started like your own virtual like mentorship meetup area, and it's grown as we can dig into here in a little bit. And then you found this guy who very successful in Airbnb to partner with on. I mean, that's really cool. Like that in itself is just a really cool success story for people to in there when you're talking about the like I can't mentality, and like you didn't even have a property that you had ever Airbnb'd yet, and you've built a business out of Airbnb while learning that. Like, that's cool. That's really cool. All right. So a couple questions that I wanted to ask you about short-term rentals. And then we'll kind of dig into a little bit more about where you're at now, where you guys are going, and what you guys do, because I think it's really cool. But my first question I'd like to ask you is something that I get asked all the time, especially when I was in Hawaii or some of those big markets where it's like a big controversial point. Do you think short-term rentals are here to stay?
Yeah, that's a really good question, David. Do I think short-term rentals are here to stay? I definitely think that they're here to stay. Do I think regulations are going to be changing? Yes. You have to look at it as like Uber. Uber came into the space and a lot of people were very upset. You know, the taxi industry was very angry. They didn't want it to happen. A lot of the counties were changing their regulations. But, as we see now, Uber is here to stay. And it's such a benefit to the community, and people can see that. It's the same thing with short-term rentals. You know, there's been vacation rentals, for centuries. It's been around forever. Florida, for example, that's been such, they've had vacation rentals in Florida for, since the beginning of Florida. Like, people want to stay in Florida for a vacation. They might not want to live there, but they do want to stay there at least part-time. So it is here to stay, but regulations probably are going to be changing, especially when there is like stuff coming out with like people that are getting injured. There's like, there was a recent shooting with Airbnb. So things are probably going to get maybe regulated, but I don't think that it's like there's going to be like a no Airbnb allowed. There's a lot of people that are people know what they want. There's a lot of new business and money that is coming into the space. But it does really come down to the individual municipality who the county is deciding. So Hawaii, let's say, for example, is going to be saying, let's say, you're not allowed to short-term rent, but there are going to be counties that will allow it. There can't be like a blanket policy that will say you're allowed to. It really is down to the county. But I think as people realize how much money there is in the short-term rental space from a county perspective, how much they're able to make on that TOT, that transient occupancy tax, as well as how it also helps the local businesses thrive. Airbnb is going to be here, and it's just there's going to be tweaks and changes to come.
Yeah, I agree completely. So I just read the Airbnb Story. I don't know if you've seen that book yet. I think it's fairly new, but it's like the story of how they started, which I think is cool because it's just three random dudes who like literally put up air mattresses during an event and were like, hey, this was fun. I bet we could do more with this. What is interesting to me that they're headquartered in San Francisco, and that's one of the two biggest cities that like San Francisco and New York have like completely banned Airbnb. And so that in the book, they're talking about how hard it is to test new programs because they can't test in their headquarters market. But I think, and you kind of touched on it there, I think a lot of it from what they were saying in the book and just from what I've seen, especially in Hawaii, is that a lot of the issues, I mean, you mentioned the shooting or some racist, those aren't necessarily Airbnb issues. Those are host issues. And they just happen to manifest themselves as Airbnb because people want to blame the more money involved authority to get more out of it. But hotels, like that's the big issue, is hotels are seeing like, oh, this is a real competitor and a real threat, but we still have enough money to fight this. So we're going to because in Hawaii, like the counties where it's like the most difficult are the hotel counties or the counties where it's like $1 million homes and they just don't want their neighbor to Airbnb for no other reason than my home costs a lot of money and I don't want my neighbor to Airbnb. Which is just funny because I'm in San Diego and I've been Airbnb a room for 4 months now and all my neighbors know and nobody cares. Like, so I don't know.
Well, I think you brought up a really good point, David, with those hotels, and that the hotel areas, a lot of the regulations that we do see changing are in these very built out metropolitan areas. And that's because that's where there's a lot of money. There's a lot of hotel power in those places. You know, the hotels and the cities work very hand in hand. So there are hotel lobbyists that are working within those cities. But some really cool, interesting stats that came out through Airbnb was that I believe it was in rural parts of the Carolinas, the pace of short-term rentals is actually outpacing the growth of hotels in those metropolitan cities because there aren't places for people to stay in those more rural locations. And like you were saying before, with it's not Airbnb specifically, it is the host. And like any business, there are systems that you can put into place. So a lot of this also has to come down to education. And if hosts are able to create the systems to be able to screen guests, you can't just depend on Airbnb or one of these online online booking platforms to be able to, you know, get in quality guests. It really comes down to the host. But there's a lot of really good stuff that is coming out of these changes. It's going to weed out a lot of bad people that aren't here to stay. But there's a lot of opportunity. This is such a green market for people to be able to profit from the short-term rental niche in real estate.
Absolutely. And for the record, it's not only the host. Like if you're hearing this, the horror stories you hear about guests, there are some of those and they're true. I don't know that I'll ever see one of those because I live in the property and I'm like this somewhat intimidating looking asshole. So I don't foresee that I'll ever run into like the massive orgy in my house because I'm here. But you know, we've heard those horror stories, but again, these are like the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. Like it's happened like a handful of times in the like 170 million guests they've had or whatever. So don't worry about that stuff. If you're looking into this, don't let that kind of crap through you. That's like saying you don't want to get into real estate because you don't want to, flush a toilet. Well, guess what? I've never dealt with a toilet. So
yeah. People surf and there's a bunch of sharks in the water, but there's things that you do to not get bitten by a shark. You don't wear shiny objects. You don't go out at night. It's the same thing with hosting. There are
you don't
sharks
go in
out
when
there.
You're already bleeding.
Yeah, you don't go in when you're already bleeding. There's things that you can do to be able to prevent and mitigate those types of situations from happening. So it really does come down to host education.
That's a good analogy. I like that. I'm gonna have to use that shark analogy again. All right. So do you have a preference between Airbnb and VRBO, which I think is hilarious that they're trying to like make themselves all hipster dipster by saying VRBO instead of VRBO, but
yeah, that's a good question, David. Airbnb and VRBO, these are booking channels that you can host your home on. There is a difference though with the types of clientele that you're getting on Airbnb versus, let's say, VRBO. Airbnb, it's going to be typically people that are very new to the market. This might be their entry gateway to hosting, and it's also going to be a cheaper type of clientele. When we're dealing with things like Booking.com, Expedia, Travelocity, VRBO, these are going to be typically they are going to be an older demographic. They might be a little bit more experienced. VRBO's actually been around since, I believe, 95. So VRBO has actually been longer since Airbnb. So these channels are a little bit more for established people that are within the space. And it's also location dependent too. So it's a different type of clientele. There is not one that is better than the other. People on, let's say, VRBO and HomeAway pay a little bit more than people on Airbnb, but you're able to get a lot more bookings on Airbnb than, let's say, VRBO, HomeAway, and Booking.com.
Yeah, that's absolutely been my experience. I'm getting, on a bad day, $20 more a night on VRBO, probably closer to like 30, 40. But I get one, maybe two bookings a month. Whereas Airbnb, I might get, $20, $30 less, but I've got like at least 20 days a month booked through them. And shoot, this month I might only have like 5 or 6 days this month that I didn't have someone staying here. And it's days I blocked off because I wasn't going to have time to clean because of flights or whatever. Which is funny because as of like last night when someone booked the only 2 remaining days available, I proved that if I hadn't blocked those days off, I probably would have been full this month. So it might be a little bit less, but when you factor in cleaning fees and stuff, whatever. Yeah, I think it's funny that VRBO had existed for so long and like nobody knew it existed until Airbnb decided to just like disrupt the entire industry. So it goes to show you that it's not always first that wins. Cool. Do you prefer, so we'll talk into some, actually, I'll ask you what your favorite Airbnb strategy is first, and then we'll ask the rental arbitrage question. So, yep.
That's a good question. My favorite strategy. So for those that don't know, there within short-term renting, there is different types of ways that you can short-term rent. There is, you could do traditional buy and holds, or your BRRRRs, your fix and flips. You can do turnkey properties. You could do co-hosting. Co-hosting is a very unique strategy. This is kind of very specific to short-term renting, and this is basically property management. In traditional long-term rental real estate, depending on where you live, which state you're in, you have to be either licensed to be able to manage other people's properties. Within the Airbnb short-term rental space, you don't need to have a license to be able to manage people's short-term rentals. So you can basically become a property manager very easily. Anybody can become a property manager. And there's a lot of money in the space. What we're able to make as property managers through co-hosting is what somebody that is investing all this money into a single family home. So I might be able to make $400, $500, $1,000 a month managing somebody's property versus having to invest all this money. So I love co-hosting. I think it's a very scalable business. When we look at companies like Evolve, Vacation Rental, or Vacasa, all these different companies, they're all just property management companies. So it's a scalable niche within short-term renting. The other very unique one, which is all the buzz right now, is rental arbitrage, or re-renting, subleasing, corporate housing. That is another very popular strategy within the short-term rental space, where you are basically, I'm working with landlords to be able to, or apartment complexes to sublease that property as a corporate housing entity, and then I listed on sites like Airbnb, VRBO, HomeAway for a specific type of traveler. So this is what I love so much about short-term renting, is that there's a bunch of different niches within it. All of them have their different types of takeaways. Co-hosting, it's going to be you're only getting a management fee of around 15 to maybe 25%. But you're not investing any of your money personally. Rental arbitrage, you're investing your own money into just the lease and the furnishing, so it is a lot cheaper. Around $10,000 is a good ballpark for what you would be investing into a property, but the returns is 100%. But you also do take on all the risk. So leveraging both of them within the space is kind of the optimal strategy, which we teach, which isn't what a lot of people do teach in the space. But we look at both of them and we say, how can we utilize both strategies? And then once we do get that cash flow, diverting it into traditional buy and holds, which is going to create more of that generational wealth.
That's cool. So what does it look like? Like, what's an example of you guys combining that?
So an example of this would be, probably, David, is within the DC market. We are investing into rental arbitrage properties. So within the DC market, my partner John, he started off with around 22 properties through rental arbitrage, and it's you're investing a lot of your own cash into that business, but you're able to scale very quickly. But it is also very seasonal. So during the slower seasons, you might not be able to get those 2,000, you might not be able to get, maybe, let's say, double the note value if it's during the slow seasons. You might just be able to break even during some months. So a strategy that we use is I've started taking on clients to be able to manage their properties for them. And basically that levels of things out. So now we're able to know that we're able to profit every single month instead of just maybe breaking even during those slower months.
Man, I tried to mute that, and I guess my sneeze is going to be forever embedded on this show. I apologize. That's cool, man. That's really cool. So I completely agree. I love that there's so many different strategies. I'm kind of doing a mix, I guess. So I'm doing rental arbitrage, but I live in the place. So I got my landlord to agree to me renting out rooms whenever my family's out of town. And I just didn't mention that they're out of town a lot. And then, I'm renting out the downstairs bedroom, bathroom, kind of like a house hack. And I was renting downstairs and upstairs, but I actually decided to turn the downstairs into a 2-person max listing. I've got a couple more, 3 or 4 showing up before the end of this month, but after this month is over, it'll be a 2-person max listing. And then I'm going to find a queen frame and mattress and a TV. In fact, for testing it out, I might just use the TV that's in my master and just throw it in there and just test the waters with a second booking, probably because it's upstairs and not directly attached to the kitchen. Probably drop the price like $20 a night. So it'll be affordable, like super, like ridiculously underpriced for the market. And then I'm going to have two different listings for two different rooms in the house and see how much more that generates out of my, but as of right now, I mean, my rent is $3,000 a month here in San Diego, and in 3 months, my best, and I'm still learning how to do this, but in 3 months, my best is 2,300 that I pulled in through Airbnb. So considering how much my rent is, that's not bad for one bedroom. And I've got to meet some cool people.
Yeah, it's an exciting space. There are so many different ways within the short-term rental space that you can do things like house hack. You can do rental arbitrage. You can do co-hosting. You can do traditional, BRRRR with short-term renting. There's also things like glamping, and I've had people on the podcast that even purchase like Airstreams. And then they turn those into short-term rentals, or they purchase a farm and then they have cabins that they also short-term rent. And then they're able to incorporate Airbnb experiences to be able to upsell the people that stay on their properties. There's just so much within the space. And that's why this is my favorite form of real estate investing.
I like that you mentioned the farm thing. That's like a goal of mine, is like go back to Missouri and get my own little like 5 or 10 acre patch to do like a couple tiny homes or cabins on. I think it's just a cool experience. Like I see people doing that. I'm like, man, that looks fun. What are some big mistakes that you see people making with short-term rentals that are pretty easy to avoid? Like for me, I know for a fact that my biggest mistake so far when I started was I didn't realize that I could just shift my check-in time to like 6 p.m. And so I was giving myself like a 2-hour window to clean the place on lunch before I, like run home, clean the place, run back before a guest showed up, which in itself wasn't terrible until I had a guest who didn't check out on time, and I came home to clean the place and they were making lunch. And I was like, crap. Well, let me text this person because I'm doing everything myself. And I'm like, let me text this person to tell them that the house might not be cleaned enough. So I changed that very quickly. But
yeah, that's a really good question, David. The biggest mistake that I see within the Facebook groups and the community is people choosing to use smart pricing. So smart pricing is a tool on Airbnb, which they try to say like your home is worth this much. Biggest issue with that though is that Airbnb is always going to underprice your house, your unit. Because they're trying to fill occupancy and they don't care so much about how much you're able to make. So let's say like my property, they say that it's worth like $40 a night. I don't charge $40 a night for my basement unit. I charge like anywhere between $80 to $100 a night. If I was using the Airbnb smart pricing, I would be way undervaluing myself and my home. So a lot of people don't know that, and they think because they're getting 100% occupancy that their home is doing good. Well, if you're getting 100% occupancy, then that probably means that you're underpricing your home. You should be aiming for around anywhere between 70 to 80% occupancy is the ideal range for where you want your listing to be done. So I know that you use, David, because you're a professional, you actually use dynamic pricing. So dynamic pricing is one of the tools that it looks at the market and it says based off of events and off of other things that are happening, based off of weekend prices, seasonality, how much your home should be worth based off of what your base price is. So it can be confusing to know like how much is your basement unit worth, but if you do know how much you're trying to make, and you can look and analyze what other people in the market are also charging, if they're not using the Airbnb smart pricing and they're able to give the actual value for what the property's worth, you can make a whole lot more.
yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you calling me a professional for that. The reality for those of you listening is that Julian and I talked like 2-3 weeks ago, and he told me about that. And I was like, I'm an idiot. I've been leaving money on the table. However, since then, it has definitely helped because I know for a fact that I've had some much higher value bookings. And, I'm kicking myself. I got someone staying over Thanksgiving next week, and they paid the normal like $50 a night, and the dynamic pricing had it at like 110. And so if I had been doing that sooner, I'm sure I would have been making a lot more money through that period. Now, granted, having someone come and stay and making like $400 is still great. But if it was $700, it'd be better. So it's nice to see larger numbers when people book for sure. So I completely agree with dynamic pricing. After only 2 weeks of using it, it's been wonderful.
You
Oh,
might want
sorry.
to include a link to your Beyond Pricing subscription, your referral link.
There you go. Yeah.
That's a
Hey,
good place to drop the
that's
link.
that's true. There is a link for that. So if you are Airbnb hosting, check the notes down below. Because seriously, like I've already made a ton of money on just 2 bookings that have booked through dynamic pricing. They've both been over $20 a night more than what I was charging. And I hooked it up to VRBO, and it's charging like $40 a night more than I was there. In fact, it wanted to charge 200 a night for my place, and I was like, that's, even if that's accurate, no. I cut it down like $80 because I was like, I don't care that much. I'm not trying to make $200 a night, because at that point I feel like I've got way higher expectations from guests, and I just want to be able to like hang out with them, have a beer with them, not like have champagne waiting on their pillow for for $200 a night. I better be offering like chocolate on the pillow and stuff, and I don't want to do that. All right. So what do you think are some of the most important things to do when you're getting started? Like, what are some things that people overlook when they're starting out, maybe?
Things that people overlook when they're starting out.
I guess we kind of just covered one.
Yeah, I think it's really important when you are just starting out. Look at this. You want to start one unit like you're going to be starting, let's say 10. It's all about systems that you have in place. If you're just looking to, maybe stay small and list like a basement unit, yeah, you can offer a very cheap and affordable place and, be able to help you cover your rent. But you're also going to be competing with a lot of other people that are offering a similar service. It's the systems that you have in place when you are just starting off. Do you have a system for your house manuals? Are you educating yourself in the space? Do you know what other professional hosts are using in their rules? Do you have a system for your pricing? Do you have a system for how you're going to be reaching out to cleaners? It can be a lot for people that are just coming into this business because it's not real estate. This is hospitality. But there is education out there. There is tools out there for you to be able to utilize so that you can optimize your listing. One of the big things is people take really bad photos. It's actually kind of funny when you're going through a lot of the listings and they're like, it looks like they're maybe running through the home and all the lights are off. And like, why would you put that online? Those are easy things that people don't maybe understand, that people, you have to put yourself in the guest perspective. If I was going through Airbnb or any of these sites and scrolling through the listings, what is going to be calling to me? What's going to pop? What's going to attract? Things like your title. Is your title just like 1 bedroom downtown, or is it, 1 bedroom with free Netflix and queen size bed and beer in the fridge? Are you doing things to be able to attract the type of client, the type of guest that you'd like, or are you just posting a very dirty, very unattractive place online? That's really you have to come from a hospitality mindset.
Yeah, that's big. That's definitely big. I changed my title recently, and what I love about Airbnb is that they do the professional photos for you. I thought that was really, really smart. So I took some cell phone pictures. Actually, I think I took them with my Canon, but I'm not a pro, so they were decent photos. But after like 1 or 2 bookings, Airbnb hits me up and says, "Hey, we found this professional photographer. She charges, I don't know, like $140." And they're like, "But we'll take it out of your next booking, so you don't actually have to pay a penny. Would you be down?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds smart. Let's do that." And so, yeah, you pay for it, but you pay for it out of someone else's booking. So it doesn't actually come out of your bank account. And then, oh man, like photos are so much better. And the nice thing is, like, she came in, I was at work. So she took the pictures of the place, but then she took the pictures of like the neighborhood. She took pictures of like the pool area, which I wouldn't have even thought to put on there, even though I listed that I had a community pool. And she made the neighborhood look amazing. Everything looks great. Like, she did a fantastic job. And for the $140, like, my booking shot through the roof. So obviously the first booking paid for that, but then every booking after that has probably been at least in part due to those photos. So
no, you hit on a really good point in that the Airbnb photos, it does make such a big difference. The small amount of money that you do have to invest in a professional photographer outweighs exponentially more. You're losing out on potentially thousands of dollars if you aren't taking professional photos, because they just help your listing so much. But one thing that I do want to let people be aware of is, if you are going with the Airbnb photos, those are Airbnb proprietary photos. They keep those photos. Those aren't your photos. So that's one of the disadvantages. The advantage of it is that it is an Airbnb photographer, so they do know what attracts type of Airbnb clients. But there is like resources out there. Like we do have a video where, because we use our own photographers, and we get to pick which photos that we want to be able to list. So there is a difference from like traditional real estate photography versus like Airbnb photography. But if you're just starting off, you don't have a clue like who to reach or what to do, the Airbnb photos is a good place to start.
Right on. That's some good advice. Didn't even know that, which is probably a downside, because I've definitely been using those photos elsewhere. So I should probably make sure I know what I'm doing there. All right. Do you have any like tips and tricks you think for like a new investor in the Airbnb game or the short-term rental game?
Yeah, I think if you're looking to get started into real estate investing, I think that it's probably the best option for you. If you don't have money, let's say, you can get into co-hosting and start managing other people's properties and gain experience. Like I got my first client when I didn't even have any experience. I had the podcast, which I was able to say like, hey, I interview people, so at least I talk to people that know what they're doing. But you could say, hey, I have a blog, and you might have like a couple of blog posts out there and be like, hey, I've got a blog, or I talk about Airbnb stuff, or whatever is able to give you credibility to be able to justify why you'd be a good host. There's a lot of people out there that want to get into the space that don't have a clue how to host. And if you just come with the knowledge, they're willing to be able to work with you, and you can learn as you're also getting their property listed. That's what I did with my first client. And so it's a good way to be able to get into the space. And then if you're looking to get into larger things, let's say you're looking to get into rental arbitrage, just the returns are crazy. Like we didn't talk about the returns, but for a rental arbitrage property, you're looking at anywhere from let's say a $500 to $3,000 a month. Are your typical type of returns. It's really not uncommon. This is, during the high seasons, you can, for a $2,000 property, let's say that you are renting, you could potentially get, $6,000 a month off of, $6,000 a month gross. So you're netting, let's say $4,000 off of that property, maybe $3,000. That's not impossible within this space. So people don't realize how lucrative this space is, which is probably good, and we should probably stop talking about this. But no, it's life changing. Like we have our own mastermind group, and it's crazy. Like we have like over 20 people right now within our group, and people with just like one property, they're making like $1,500. Like where does that happen in traditional real estate? That's you have to spend $40,000 to make maybe like let's say $300 a month. While in the short-term renting space, you could have maybe 2 clients and you're making $1,000 and you didn't have to upfront any of the cash, or you have one rental arbitrage property and you're able to make, $2,000, $3,000. It's really unheard of. But that's why I'm excited to be able to talk about this stuff with you guys.
Yeah. And for the price of a deposit and a first month's rent, in essence, you're getting in. I mean, my deposit here was $3,000. My first month's rent was $3,000. So for $6,000, I could have theoretically rental arbitrage with a property that, is in San Diego. And that's way different than a 20% down payment. So definitely some pretty cool, pretty cool opportunities in there. Awesome. Well, let's see, before we get into like my standard questions, is there anything on Airbnb that we missed that you think we should touch on real quick?
No, I just think the most important thing, if you are just starting off though, check with your regulations. So many people make the mistake of investing into a property. And that's what's scary about like traditional, buy and hold type of real estate investing is you might be purchasing a property without having done the research. Like when I purchased my property, the regulations changed just a couple months before I actually purchased it. But there was talk about it for a while, which I didn't do that much in-depth research. But regulations do can prevent you from being able to maximize that rental income. So definitely check with your regulations, get everything from the .gov site. Don't trust just like, what people are saying on Facebook. Go to the source. If you can't find the source, then, make some phone calls, but it is so important to check with regulations before you do anything.
Yeah, I agree for sure. Especially in some of those bigger towns where there's kind of some controversy behind. I know New York, like good luck. And they were like the biggest Airbnb market too before that, all those restrictions. So hopefully that gets overturned eventually, but who knows? Awesome. So if a young service member was to walk up to you asking for advice, and this is perfect because you're still a young service member, which kind of like myself, I'd like to consider myself young. Ask you for advice, like financial advice or whatever. Like what would you tell them? What do you wish you'd known when you first got in the military?
Yeah, it's tough because I had the ability to be able to house hack. I know a lot of the other services don't have that type of luxury to be able to rent out. But for new service members, I would start with just try a bunch of different things. That's really what I did. Not everybody's going to be a short-term rental host. It's a lot of work. It takes a certain type of person to be to do it. I think everybody can do it, but you have to find out what's right for you. Like I know people that are crushing it in the wholesaling space. I know people that are crushing it as real estate agents, and they're in the military. But you have to find what's right for you. And that really just comes through trial and error. Educate yourself. There's a lot of really good resources. I read a lot of books, listen to a lot of podcast episodes, get the MWR. So there's this app called Overdrive where you can actually connect with the local MWR. So like the Army MWR, there's the Navy MWR, and there's free audiobooks, free ebooks. Listen to those, educate yourself, find what resonates with you and what you're passionate about, and just try things. And you're not going to know until you actually take action and do stuff. But you have to take that first step.
Yeah, that MWR app is awesome. I wish I'd known about that sooner. I love my Audible membership, but free is definitely better than $30 a month. So I have the super high end, way too many books Audible membership, and I still max it out. This weekend I drove up to San Francisco and back, and I think I finished like 6 books, which is great, but like at some point you're like, okay, maybe some music for a change, but they were all good books. So what is the one resource that you recommend, like book, course, website, whatever, that you would recommend to anyone looking to get started in real estate or business?
Yeah, I think a book that really resonates with me is The One Thing. It's hard because I was just talking about, you have to try a bunch of different things, but you have to try a bunch of different things until you find the thing that resonates with you. And once you find that thing that does resonate with you, you should really start focusing and doubling down on that. There's a lot of ways to be able to make money, but you have to find the one thing that does resonate with you. I don't think you have to read the book now, but it really is that the whole concept is you find what you're passionate about, find something that really is in line, and then forget about everything else. I like what Warren Buffett says. There's a story that his pilot was like, hey, give a list of all the things that you want to do in your life, because I guess he was like overwhelmed with like, Mr. Buffett, there's way too much that I want to do. And then Warren was like, take a list, write down like the top 3 or the top 5 things, and then get rid of everything else and just focus on those things. It doesn't have to be exactly one thing, but you do need to know what it is that you're doing, and you can't be distracted by the new shiny object.
Yeah, that's a good book. I think that's probably one of my favorite Gary Keller books. So it's definitely a good read. All right. So before we wrap this up, anything that you'd like to add? Any parting advice or big ideas?
I don't know if you want me to throw out what we're doing as far as investing wise, but
sure, go for it. I was going to tell you to plug your website in just a second anyway. So let's hear it.
Yeah. Well, one of the cool things that we are doing for people that are interested in getting into hosting but don't want to personally host themselves, we have this this management company called Co-Host It, where we can actually manage your properties for you. If you're looking to get into the rental arbitrage space, we also have this really cool program, the Turnkey Arbitrage Program. So this is for people that maybe they realize like I'm not going to be a host. I'm not going to be a good host. I don't want to create the systems and the processes to be able to maximize this business. So we do offer that type of passive investing for investors through our turnkey arbitrage program. We've had a lot of, heard a lot of positive feedback from it. A lot of people are interested. So if you do want to find out more about how you can invest passively into the space, or if you'd like to work with us, we do offer consulting and management and just a whole slew of resources. You can go to shorttermsage.com is the blog and the podcast, where you can definitely get a lot of free content there. And if you're looking to get into the property management or the turnkey arbitrage stuff, then you can go to cohostit.com for more information on that as well.
Right on. Yeah, and tell him that you heard about him from this podcast so he doesn't think he wasted his time talking to us. No, that was awesome. So, Julian, well, I guess I don't need to ask you where people can get a hold of you anymore. I don't know. You got any good social media handles people can reach out on?
Yeah, I'm all over. You can just go to shorttermsage.com. You can follow me, Short Term Rental Success, Vacation Rental Machine. There's a lot of different shows that we're doing. So the best place to go is shorttermsage.com and all the social media, and you can find me on there.
Yeah, Julian's definitely becoming a hub for Airbnb, and it's really cool to watch. Which is why I went and called. We talked for probably an hour and a half the other day, just so that I could learn new things about Airbnb, and he was awesome. So definitely go check his stuff out if you're interested in the short-term rental game. Julian, thanks so much for joining us today. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. I'm very, very honored to be on the show. I'd like to be a military millionaire like you one day.
Wouldn't we all, right? We'll be there. Thanks, brother. Have a great day.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening to another episode about my journey from military to millionaire. If you liked it, be sure to visit FromMilitaryToMillionaire.com/podcast to subscribe to future podcasts. While you're there, we'd love for you to rate the show, give us a review on iTunes. Now get out there and take action.